Hi, this is Dave from Red Shark, and I'm with a person who needs no introduction, and we're, amongst other things, we're going to be talking about this.
Red Shark News at NAB 2018 is brought to you by Adamus. Unlock creativity. Blackmagic Design, amazing solutions for film, post-production, and television. G Technology, the go-to drives for creative professionals. Frame.io, the collaboration platform for video teams.
So Grant, hi, really nice to see you again. I think I saw you on Sunday and you were rushing off to rehearse for your press conference. How did that go?
Yeah, well, the rehearsal didn't go. I didn't really rehearse in the end, so I just winged it and it seemed okay.
Well, I had good feedback about it. And,
yeah, a couple of people said it was okay.
Yeah,
so
well, and just people were queuing to get in, and it was like a football crowd.
I think I relaxed a bit more because I knew it was probably going to overrun a little bit, so I was like, what can I can't get it shorter, I don't think so. I just didn't worry so much about time and just got through it as quick as I could. You try to make sure you tell everyone. I always think that it's important to tell everyone why we've done things a bit and try to explain some of the thoughts behind it. Because then when you come onto the floor, you get a much better conversation from people because they come back, oh, you know, when you said this, but what about this? And you know, it's almost half a conversation. And on the floor, you get the remaining half of the conversation. So I think that, plus anyway, it's just interesting to know what we're thinking about things and why we've done products in certain ways. I think it helps.
I think these days there are so many amazing new products and people just see it as a flow of new products without necessarily appreciating the thought that goes into it. And this is a good case in point, isn't it? Because you know, it's got a familiar look to it. It's a little bit like a DSLR. It's obviously a...
Ergonomics were a huge issue. What really drove it was actually the big screen, because you need a big screen to focus 4K. But also the ergonomics about camera control was a really big thing. And audio, I really wanted to suit the audio up to a new level, because you don't want to have a lot of rigging when you're running around. So I try to get the best audio possible.
Of course, yeah. And it's too far away to see, but we've got a proper mini XLR there. Preamp phantom power, unbelievably useful compared to a camera that doesn't have that.
Yeah, and that's what you expect from a professional camera. Yes. So even though it might be small, the reality is it still is a professional camera. Like there's 4 microphones on it, and even the USB expansion port, we can do things with that. So at the moment we're obviously recording straight to a media disc, and that's really nice because you're recording onto the disc you edit from. So it really saves a lot of time, lack of card shuffling. So you know, that's what we were trying to think about. You know, like, and if you feel even that adjustment there, that's the iris.
Yes.
So you don't have an iris adjustment on photo lenses, but you get it with that. But then if you push the buttons here, it changes mode into white bounce or shutter angle and things like that. So, and these are usable selectable buttons here. So it's very fast to kind of use. There's a lot of power in your right hand there, you know.
Yeah, and it's nicely balanced as well. It feels lightweight, but it certainly doesn't feel plastic.
And that one's actually heavy because that one's aluminium because it's a prototype. The production ones will be carbon fibre polycarbonate composite, so they'll be lighter. And that's a new material that we've been working with to try and lighten.
Yeah, because normally anything with carbon fibre in it is almost bespoke, isn't it?
Yeah, to a certain degree, and that's the great thing about the polycarbonate composite. It's mouldable, so I think you get some of the benefits and the strength and the durability, but also you get the lighter weight. But you don't want to use plastic because that's real consumery and not really robust enough for a professional camera. So it was a difficult thing. We'd been using magnesium for a few years. We did those original studio cameras, and that was kind of the material of choice. Because originally we machined out of aluminium, and that was heavy-ish, you know, and expensive and slow. So we moved to magnesium, molded magnesium, and that was lighter weight and faster. But then you kind of think, well, what's the next step? Is there anything lighter than magnesium? And it's difficult to find a metal that's lighter, so that's why we started looking at carbon fibre and materials like that, you know, sort of the next step.
And I was really astonished when I heard about the dual ISO. And what was you thinking about? I mean, it's obvious benefits, but I mean...
Well, I think what's interesting is I've been involved a lot in the design of the product, but the technology side, of course, keeps marching on. There's Color Science version 4, the dual gain, and obviously higher gain rates. There's improvements in calibration. I mean, sensors require a lot of calibration to get them performing well. And there's a lot of Color Science work, and you know, there's also a lot of work in the electronics. You know, the power supplies that power the sensor actually contribute noise, and they bring the noise floor up, and the heat brings the noise floor up, all these things. So as they make advances in all these areas and all the teams, and we don't outsource any of this stuff, it's all done internally. So as we get better and better at things, you see that benefit in the products. And like, for example, the Color Science work, that's spreading across all the cameras. It's in as a broadcast, it's in some of the Ursa Minis, or it's coming to them. It'll also be in, obviously the studio camera and micro studio camera, and some of those other cameras will get it eventually too. So, you kind of get these almost revolutions of technology steps, and you can apply that particularly in the new products, but you can filter it across the others as well.
And what's interesting is that, I mean, what is it, six years since your first camera? 6, 7
I
years?
don't know, you're right, it's about that. Actually haven't kept track of it. It seems longer.
It really does.
Like tiring.
But I guess my point is you've been through so many generations now that while somebody might say, well, Blackmagic, they haven't got the experience of say Arri or Sony, whatever. Yeah. But actually, the experience you've been through in starting from scratch, and it's cumulative as well.
Well, we're also Da Vinci, so we've got probably more colour science guys than any of the camera manufacturers do. So the great thing is we've got the advantage of that. So generally, when it comes to, obviously all cameras have SDKs and colour science and all that, and there's a huge distance between the Da Vinci team and everyone else to allow them to be independent in that area.
Yes.
But at the same time, you've got some wonderful algorithm guys and colour science guys in the team that you can...
So you have an almost infinite depth of knowledge
exactly,
in that field.
Exactly, And that was one of the huge benefits we've had, because you've just got all these incredibly smart guys who can do all this kind of work.
So in one thing that appeals to me about this still is that you can record to ProRes. And I love that because I don't make much video, but when I do, I want it to be usable out of the camera and to work in the NLE.
Exactly.
So I think that we're all kind of blindsided when Apple announced ProRes RAW. Is that something you're going to look at? Do you think? Or
well,
is
there's some problems with
not
it.
Such a big deal.
Well, it's basically it lacks all the color science. So it's a lookup table and a Bayer
because
package.
It's a standardization, isn't it? So I guess all the bespokeness from the individual.
It's just it's a container with a LUT.
Yes.
And so the difficulty is if we record into that and it winds up in Final Cut, unless that colour science is in there, it's going to look bad. So it needs more work. Yeah. It's somewhat consumery probably at the moment. So it's just one of those things. There's some issues. We do that already in the camera. The reason you use RAW is you want to bypass that stage and go into Da Vinci. Da Vinci already does all these formats. They do all the native camera formats with all the colour science from all the camera manufacturers in there to handle that. That's where all the work is. It's in the colour science. No, so often when we get RAW files from various sources, it's the camera manufacturer's colour science and our colour science working to make those images look good.
How many other manufacturers have, the world's standard colour grading system?
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of different. I'm talking about high-end, Hollywood grade, cameras here, not consumer stuff. So that's kind of how it works. And so Da Vinci already does it. Obviously, we record to RAW formats that Da Vinci already handles. It comes with Da Vinci, so you get all that for free. So I think it's a good solution that we have. So it's one of those things.
I don't want to spend all our time talking about this because you've got some other amazing stuff and some of the A10 developments, and if you like your control surfaces covered with controls, this is the place to be. This is camera control unit, and we can't show this, but it's beautifully engineered. It just feels right, and it
was one of the
looks amazing.
There was 3 things that people have been asking us really heavily for a couple of years now, and I think the number one was when are we going to get an Ultra HD pocket cinema camera. So we've gone a little bit better. It's a 4K one, but it really goes beyond, I think, what people expected the new one to be. So again, we wanted to show that here. But the 2 other things people asked for was, one of them was when are you going to do a camera control unit, and I think that we achieved. The other one was obviously a B4 broadcast type camera, which we did in January, and also we've launched this. This is going to ship in a month or so. But the thing about a camera control units is generally most people have never really used one because they're so expensive and they're so exclusive, and you've got to cut a hole in this because they're normally a module. They have those trucks where they cut the big thing and they put the unit in. So what we wanted to do is bring all these sort of standard interface that you see on these really high-end camera control units, but put 4 of them in a panel that you can just put on your desk. So you get the benefits of actually having it, but without sort of it being too intrusive. And it's only $3,000 for 4. And you can change cameras.
Which is a third the price of a typical single channel.
From one channel, and you can change the cameras pretty quickly, so you can see nice big camera numbers. You can roll through the camera numbers. So you can actually use one panel to control quite a lot of cameras, but you can also add more panels. You can have like the TV studio switch has got 8 inputs, so you can put 2 of those and directly control every camera. But a lot of times people don't have as many cameras as they do inputs of the switcher. So being able to change through, they might be actively controlling 2 or 3 cameras with a few others that they kind of go to, do a tweak and come back from. So it's quite flexible. It's very fast to change camera numbers. But you do get all that beautiful feel of the control. And you can select the camera. When you push it, it selects the aux out of the switcher to the camera you're controlling, so you can see tech monitoring while you're doing your grading. So it's really quite nice.
Yeah, and there's a huge trend, isn't there, towards multicam productions and live streaming. And this will allow you to do it in the best possible way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'd love to spend more time talking about that, but I want to come on to Resolve. And Resolve is now getting so capable in so many directions. I'm finding difficulty keeping all of those in mind at once.
I know, it's a bit like
you have to think about, oh yeah, and then it does that, and you have to do that. It's like juggling.
I think the way to think about Resolve is think of it as 4 people's world simultaneously in one app.
Yes.
And the reason we did that is it allows, well, there's 2 reasons I think that are very important. One of them is it allows collaboration using the same app, so you can have different people using it in very different ways.
Yes.
Like you can have a Linux machine with it running the audio room, doing all the audio work, but then you've got a bunch of editors in cubicles, maybe an editor or colorist in a theater. They can all be collaborating, and it all works because it's the same app. But the second thing is, what about people? What about people's future? Where do I want to go? Say if I'm an editor, where do I want my future to be? And when we put editing into Resolve, when a lot of editors came into it, then they discovered the color section was there, and they went into color, and they became colorists. So, that's, Frank, and he's the colorist in the facility. He was an editor, but he sort of drifted into it. And I found people that have discovered something that they didn't know they had. So they've been an editor for 15 years, now they've suddenly discovered that the beauty of color correction, and they've become a colorist. Why couldn't they have done that earlier? So I think that was a powerful idea that you saw people go through that experience. So what about audio? What about visual effects? Editors could sort of drift into visual effects and start to explore that tool set. So to me, it's like a creative empowerment or freedom. You're unshackling people from a simple NLE app. My feeling is that a simple NLE is now obsolete. What you want is something with much more creative freedom, much more ability for people to move in directions that they feel they want to do in the time they feel they want to do it. It's not up to us to constrain them. Just because some company might have acquired 3 apps and bundled them together doesn't mean to say that's the way people want to be. And it's not up to us to decide what people want to be. Let them be whatever they want to be, and everyone's different. So to us, it's about the second big reason for it is to open up people's career paths to move in different directions.
I can see it. You're expanding their world, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's up to them to feel whether they like that or not. It's not an analytical process. It's not a business model. It's just feels freer. And that's what Blackmagic was founded on, to allow people to be creatively free. Free of the big old post houses that had, the guy that ran them was a psychopath whose only claim to fame was a big bank loan. Just they can do it themselves and be free. That's what this is about. That's why we're different to everyone else. This is not a market segment business and all this market research and you got to have a business case. This is just feels like it will free people up. So let's do it, and then we never know what's going to happen until we get here. So.
On a practical level, what impressed me when I had a very quick play with it was that you could so easily have just thrown 4 applications together, given them a common UI, and just kind of switched modes. Which would have basically been 4 separate applications. But they're dynamically linked. So if you...
There should be benefits to each page. If you tell a Fusion person, I put it in Resolve. Well, what does that mean? But if I've got benefits for it being in there, they can access between different clips in the timeline and all these other things.
Exactly.
Then they go, I've got more.
It's like if you set up a lower third, and then you go into Fusion. It's there. It is. You've got a couple of and that's actually a really good way to learn Fusion because you do it on a task-oriented basis.
Yeah, we joked to the guys saying it'd be really funny. Someone could do a whole bunch of Fusion work without actually clicking on the Fusion page because they've dropped a bunch of the effects in from the edit page and not realise they're Fusion comps. So it's actually very funny because that's what it should be like. I mean, it should stay a visual effects page for visual effects people. If you're an editor and you want to learn it, then you have to just learn a few visual effects tools. Unless you're in the edit page and you choose a plugin, not realising it's actually a Fusion comp. But it just works like a plugin. So you can stay, I don't want to learn Fusion, I want to stay an editor, so I use various effects and it's all good, exactly why I know it, but they're actually Fusion comps. So the Fusion power is being used to make it possible, but you never even have to know about it if you don't want it. It's up to you. You're free to decide which button you click on, which page you work in. You might be a different person from the morning and the afternoon. I'm a visual effects comp guy in the afternoon, or a colorist in the afternoon, I'm an editor this morning. Or you just don't do that and you specialize in just editing and someone else comes along and sits down in the same seat and does the color for you. It's just totally up to you to work out what workflow you want.
Now, I think I've told you before, I'm an audio person by background.
Yeah.
That's how I started. And I'm incredibly excited about the Fairlight integration.
Yeah.
And I was almost beside myself when I saw the panels that you're making.
Yeah.
And again, there's no limit to how you can configure that.
Yeah.
So you can have a small audio facility in a broom cupboard,
Yeah.
or you could have a massive
Imagine that. That'd be funny.
a massive facility in Burbank where you've got 4 sound mixers working, one working on Foley, one working on the music.
Yeah.
And
And I think, again, if you look at the way we did that, it's what makes you creatively free. Not needing to fork out $50,000 for the 5-bay console, but buying a 5-bay chassis and putting a couple of modules in it.
yes.
By being able to buy the modules, you can even start with a 2-bay console, put the modules in it, change it to a 5-bay if you want to upgrade, and strip all the modules out and put them into the 5-bay, sell off the 2-bay chassis. Yeah, we don't charge anything for selling stuff. You know, a lot of companies actually give you a transfer fee. We never do that. In fact, some of the product lines we've had, DaVinci and everything, had transfer fees. The first thing we killed was a transfer fee. So, you know, that's the point. You want to kind of let people buy something, upgrade, move, and as each job they do, they might be able to expand the channels and grow it. And that's really super important, I think, to be able to let people do that.
All right. Well, look, there's an infinite number of questions I'd like to ask you, but we have finite time. I think we're just about out. Thanks ever so much.
Oh, no, thank
Always
you for
a pleasure.
And always thanks for your support. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Cool.
Do you like our NAB coverage? Then make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.